Hello guys, today I'd like to talk about the new omniraptor tree interaction and its recent buffs. As many of you guys are already aware, omniraptors received a massive upgrade to their Pounce, making it significantly stronger. And as I expected, many of you guys shared your opinion about it, some calling it overpowered, others saying it doesn't make much sense given the different varieties of the trees. So I decided to make this quick discussion video to share my thoughts on the Pounce buff, on whether it's balanced or not, the reasoning behind my opinions, and some of the potential improvements. Quick disclaimer, I want to make it clear from the start that this video is purely made for discussion purpose only, and because as a pure carnivore main, I'm genuinely interested in hearing your guys' thoughts, especially from herbivore players. So feel free to please share your guys' perspectives in the comments as they are greatly appreciated. So let's get started. For those who haven't seen my recent video, omniraptor received a number of silent but extremely strong buffs, one of them being the tree immunity to certain trees. As the name suggests, this change makes omniraptors unknockdownable on specific trees, allowing them to pounce until they either run out of stamina or they get bucked off. And as I already mentioned, after posting my video, many people pointed out that it's problematic, but surprisingly, most concerns were about the bucking mechanic rather than the buff itself. Also, right off the bat, I want to say that I 100% agree that this is extremely strong, as not being able to knock down omnis off using trees is a big problem, mainly because the bucking itself being so unreliable as many of you guys mentioned. As this makes pouncing incredibly powerful, essentially allowing omniraptors to either pounce you to death or force you to drain your stamina trying to buck them off in the hopes of getting lucky, which in many cases will result in your death, as if you end up draining too much stamina to trying to buck them off, omniraptors gain a huge advantage as you can no longer run away, while also providing them a great opportunity to pin you down with less number of omnis. As if your stamina drains below 20%, even 2 omniraptors can pin down a fully grown dibble. Therefore, even as a hardcore carnivore main, I can say that this is very strong. And knowing that the developers don't like making carnivores too strong, it made me wonder, why did they decide to make this change? Well, after thinking about it in a while, there was one reason that came to my mind, which is that they did it in the preparation of the upcoming aloe. Personally, I think this makes a lot of sense, as I can imagine that bamboo or banana trees can knock down smaller tiers such as omnis, but that's completely different story when it comes to the aloe, as trees such as banana trees and bamboo trees knocking down small tiers such as omniraptors makes sense. But could you guys imagine an aloe weighing over 2 tons being knocked down by a tiny branch? Personally, from the gameplay's perspective, that wouldn't be a great experience for such a large playable, and it wouldn't really make sense in a realistic scenario as well. Therefore, I think that introduction of this change might have been an indirect buff to omnis, making it even potentially an accidental change, the same way how they accidentally released the elder omni before, making it potentially a buff that was influenced by the upcoming aloe. But nonetheless, despite some may think, I don't think that this was a bug, but rather an intentional change. And before someone points it out, despite aloe supposedly getting its own special type of a pounce, or as some people call grapple, I am pretty sure that the code they're gonna use for the pounce is gonna be either largely the same or exactly the same copy-paste version of the ones that omnis and troodons have at the moment. And the reason why I think so is because the new omni tree interaction actually applies exactly the same on troodons, making me believe that it's a copy-paste version of the code. So what are my thoughts on this? Despite how strong it is, I still lean towards seeing it as a healthy change rather than something that should be reverted. And one of the reasons is that it makes fights more interactive. And no guys, this isn't just because I'm an omni player, as I also enjoy playing herbivores and other carnivores that are actually being punished even harder by this than herbivores. But looking at how the interactive fights can be and its potential, I think this is a good start. So let me explain. Many of you guys who have played omnis or actually any other carnivores are definitely familiar with one of those boring fights where the herbivore starts camping the moment they start to lose. Essentially turning what could have been an exciting action-packed encounter into a drawn-out Mexican standoff where both sides are just simply waiting for the other to make a move, with herbivores waiting in their advantageous position until carnivores make some mistake, with carnivores waiting for the herbivores to starve to death, making this entire experience slow, tedious, and time-wasting, and most importantly, extremely frustrating for both sides. But since the introduction of the new change, I have noticed a significant shift in the players' behavior. And one of the examples that I have noticed is that many players stopped hugging trees immediately they see omnis. This essentially made the first encounter of the fights more interesting, as the fights did not instantly fall into the stale standoffs, but instead it forced players to adapt to their surroundings and fight back, making the experience more engaging overall. But unfortunately, with there being a lot of ways to camp that have nothing to do with trees, and because not all trees are Pounce safe, fights still end up often slowing down. But by this, I'm not trying to say there shouldn't be any ways to camp, as I believe that it's a great and smart strategic move, especially when you get outnumbered. But by this, I just wanted to simply point out that despite it have improved the start of the fights, they often still slip back into the same predictable pattern. Additionally, even though it's strong, it only becomes truly overpowered in certain scenarios or specific map location, as every single hotspot areas at the current moment have multiple camping options, with number of knockdownable trees, water, high ground, or rocks being scattered all around. And that's not mentioning all the number of bugs that omniraptor already have. While I do support this buff and I'll admit that I'm very fond of it, that doesn't mean guys that I want omnis to become overpowered or any less challenging. As one of the biggest reasons why I enjoy playing small tiers more than Cerrados or Carno is the increased difficulty, as dinos such as dilo, omnis, and troodons cannot afford to make a single mistake, especially now that a single knockdown is deadly, with the recovery time being double compared to before. But that would be a different topic for a different video. So let's get back to the main concern, the fact that omniraptors can pounce you to death. This concern is actually not really related to the new change to the trees, but to the bucking mechanic itself. Because right now, if hypothetically there was an area with no knockdownable obstacles and group of omniraptors happen to find you, they are very likely to pounce you to death, which is not the kind of a gameplay I want to encourage or anyone wants to experience, displaying how overpowered pouncing would be without any obstacles. But this is not the result of the improved Pounce. So how could we balance this without nerfing omnis into the ground? Well, many of you guys actually suggested the same solution as I had on my mind, which is improving bucking. As mentioned earlier, bucking is extremely luck-based with a random 50-50% chance of success, and I'm certain that many of you guys experience it yourself on how unreliable it is for the players to use. So unreliable actually that it's used as the last resort when there is nothing else to be done, since it drains stamina even when unsuccessful. Not to mention that it drains even more stamina when you manage to successfully buck them off, which is such a terrible trade-off for any herbivore or carnivore player, as once their stamina drops certain point, they stop regenerating stamina, making them unable to escape or fight back effectively, and once their stamina drains below 20%, they are basically dead, as omnis can now pin them down far more easily with less numbers. This also, in my opinion, being one of the reasons why so many people end up camping when fighting omniraptors. So here are some of the ideas from simplest to more complicated that I thought out that we could maybe fix this issue. One of the ideas being that making bucking not to drain any stamina unless it's successful and removes the stamina cost multiplier per omni. As I mentioned earlier, while bucking, the dinosaurs start losing small amount of stamina for each tick, with a successful buck costing additional stamina, which is further multiplied by the number of omnis it manages to buck off. This means that if you buck off a 1 omni, it would drain around 5% of stamina. But if you happen to have 5 omniraptors on top of you at the same time and manage to buck them off successfully, it will multiply the drained stamina by the number of additional omnis you had, meaning you would lose around roughly 25% stamina instead of the 5, which you guys can already imagine is a lot of stamina for one successful bucking. Therefore, I believe this could be a nice addition to bucking, as it will make the bucking more viable by making it less punishing. Moving on to the next one. Another interesting addition they could add into a bucking is adding weight-based bucking chance. This would be a new mechanic, which would alter the chance of bucking depending how many omnis there are on top of you and how much bigger you are compared to them. Meaning, if you're a playable that is significantly larger than the omniraptor, you would have a higher chance to buck them off. For example, having 70% chance to buck them off. But this percentage would decrease depending on how many omnis there are on top of you. Meaning, if more omniraptors manage to get a pounce before you buck them off, it would significantly start decreasing your bucking chance, capping around 40% when there are 6 omniraptors on top of you. I think personally this has 2 benefits. One from the perspective of realism, and second from perspective of making omnis more fun. From the perspective of realism, it would significantly reduce the chance of a solo omni being able to beat a large apexes, as they now wouldn't be able to pounce those apexes for long duration, reducing the chance of them being able to bleed those large things down. Now, looking at it from the perspective of making omnis fun, this addition would add a layer of challenge to omnis while making it more rewarding to play, as this would force omniraptors to coordinate their pounces better for them to successfully take down the prey. This making it much more rewarding at the same time, as well-coordinated group of omniraptors could reduce the bucking chance significantly, allowing them to secure that kill much easier. Additionally, it also makes quite of a sense when looking at a realistic perspective, as if the dinosaur is much bigger than the omniraptor, it shouldn't have such a difficulty bucking it off. While at the same time, if there are multiple omniraptors pouncing it at the same time, due to the additional weight, it would have more difficulty of shaking them off, making this change potentially beneficial from all perspectives. But still mainly hoping that this would encourage players to not camp and fight the omnis. But that's something I cannot confirm, as reality is very different than the theory. Lastly, a different buff that could improve bucking in my opinion is by increasing the buck chance over time. This mechanic would work in a way where at the beginning of the buck, they would start for example with a 30% chance to buck them off, with the chance of bucking increasing by 5% every 3 to 5 seconds while the omniraptor is pouncing you. This effect would not stack depending on per omni, but it would gradually increase it, while resetting once the buck is successful or nobody is pouncing on, giving the players a guaranteed buck eventually, without directly nerfing the omniraptors. Similarly like the previous one, I think this is an interesting change, as first of all it would provide other playables and reliable ways to buck down omnis, while at the same time providing omnis a layer of challenge, as with this, playables can now wait for the omnis to pounce them for a bit before starting to buck, allowing them to reduce the stamina consumption by using the buck, while at the same time it would reward group of omniraptors that are well coordinated, as the herbivores would not tend to buck very early from the beginning and let the omnis pounce for a bit, turning this into the actual horror survival aspect, as both sides are now pressured to do one thing, with other playables having to actively prevent omnis getting on top of them, as the buck would be essentially even worse than what we have at the beginning, highly increasing their chance of dying to them, while at the same time omnis being pressured to coordinate their pounce more effectively, as if they fail to do that, their chance of being able to kill the prey effectively decreases significantly, hopefully making the fight more interactive. But in the end of the day guys, these are just some simple ideas that popped in my mind while I was reading your guys' comments, meaning that there are a lot of flaws in my ideas. So guys, I'm fully aware that some of the suggestions that I pointed out are not perfect, but I really wanted to share these thoughts and ideas that I had with you guys, and also at the same time point out how bad bucking is. So as usual guys, feel free to please share your guys' thoughts and ideas and possibly other suggestions in the comments, as I would love to hear them. So I hope you guys enjoyed hearing some of my ideas and thoughts and the discussion that's about to happen. But for now, that's everything I got for today. See you guys next time. Bye!